Welcome to the Evolvepreneur podcast channel. Today we're talking to Nima Rahmany, who is a chiropractor and educator, specialising in helping individuals and professionals get to the root cause of their physical and emotional challenges, from stress, depressed, anxious, to living powerfully, aligned and on purpose. After building a successful chiropractic practice in Maple Ridge, Dr. Nima sold his clinic in June 2016 to pursue his passion of teaching and coaching professionals who are stressed, depressed and anxious to transform and have their best year ever in a private and corporate setting. He's also integrated mind-body tools in his quest for healing stress-related disorders in one simple follow the method, the overview method, which we're going to talk about today, which includes his adjustment above the atlas. It's interesting. And he teaches one-on-one in all groups in the world, engaging and edutating lectures filled with inspiring authenticity and edutainment. Yeah, it's very interesting, the old edutainment. So
Yeah.
welcome to the show. I'm really happy to see you. I was having a quick look at what you're doing. I'm very impressed.
It's cool to be here. I love this conversation.
Cool. And so our predominant market is entrepreneurs, so I'm going to sort of ask you questions around that. But I mean, the reality is that people are people at the end of the day. It doesn't matter what you do.
Well, entrepreneurs have a very high level of emotional challenges, mental illness, suicide. It takes a special type of individual to become an entrepreneur. You have to actually, what I've observed is that entrepreneurs come from a background where they don't they don't want to subordinate to some sort of an authority. In other words, they want to become their own authority. So there's this resistance between, authority and wanting to be their own boss. So there's a kind of a mental struggle that goes along with that. So I love being able to help people integrate that.
Yeah, and it's actually quite interesting because we're working on a project with a client at the moment about a book called Executive Loneliness. And he has this kind of similar a story about, the fact that can be a very lonely environment when you're an entrepreneur, and being mentally tough is sometimes hard.
Oh, yeah.
And those little voices in your head sometimes will beat you.
Yeah. High levels of bipolar, high levels of addictions, suicides. This is a very real thing. And I found kind of like the root cause. Yeah, absolutely. There's usually a fractured past that happened that causes entrepreneur. It's like, in the DNA of the entrepreneur is some sort of a trauma that had you not really wanting to bow to any authority other than yourself. And the ironic thing, and so it's like they want freedom from structure and authority, whereas their own freedom comes from being able to create structure and authority over themselves. So it's a paradox.
Yeah, and then you get caught in this situation where you think you're going to be your own boss, right? But what all that ends up happening is if you've got a client base, you actually have a bunch of little bosses.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's actually worse sometimes than having one guy that's got one theory.
Yeah, you go for freedom and then you realize you have a whole new series of constraints.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the hard part, is that mentally, keeping mentally tough.
That's the most important, is what I've observed. It is the single most important factor of the entrepreneur that unfortunately we put as the last, is that level of making sure that your mental and emotional self has a strong foundation. Physical, mental, emotional self. Without that as the foundation, everything else falls apart, which is the opposite of what most entrepreneurs do, is we make that the least priority because we think that everything else has got to happen first. And then we suffer from burnout, addiction. We reach our goals. Even worse, we reach our goals. We hit those targets and reach our goals and then go, shit, I am completely sick. I'm miserable. I'm divorced. My relationships are gone. My kids haven't seen me in a long time. And so it's just never-ending loop until you hit that pause button, and then you really learn how to go inside. And that's what I love helping people with.
So do you see a lot of entrepreneurs where they've got it right the first time? Like, do you think they usually go through this process? It's almost like got to happen to you to a degree before you appreciate it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, every entrepreneur goes from a place of, you know what, where I'm at, I have this dream of something greater. So you make the big leap and you, whatever, do bootstrapping or investment or whatever, and you follow this vision of yours, and you either become super duper successful right away,
Yep.
which is what happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
And your ego gets the better of you.
Yep, you start believing your own ego.
You start believing your own ego, and then you have a massive crash, a wake-up call that you're not the shit like you thought you were. Or the opposite happens, which is it's a grueling climb of which you want to give up like 5 million times. And if you just, have the intestinal fortitude enough to persist, then finally you get there, but at what cost? Your health, your relationships, so I've seen both, I've experienced both. And so I finally come up with kind of a methodology that really helps you regulate yourself. I discovered, the most important skill for an entrepreneur to learn is to become trigger proof.
Yep,
is to learn how to self-regulate your emotions. If you don't know how to handle money. If you don't, you can't handle a team. If you don't, you're crap for your clients. If you don't, you lose sight of your vision. So this is the most important thing that I've discovered, and that's how I've taken my background as a chiropractor and brought that into the work I do with coaching, which is to really help people learn how to self-regulate.
So let's dig into this a little bit, because you talk about an overview experience. So what essentially does that mean? Is it you're taking a big picture view of yourself? Is that the kind of approach? Or
good question. So if you can see in the picture behind me, can you see that? What is that?
Looks like someone like the moon to me, or maybe it's
Right.
from the moon to the earth. Yeah, I'll see now.
Exactly. Yeah. So I have that. So that's the first photograph ever taken of the planet.
Wow.
That was Christmas of 1969. Yeah, it was
4.
Christmas.
Would have been about 4 then.
Yeah. It was the Apollo mission where Neil Armstrong, they went to the moon. And so that picture, you can look it up online. It's called Earthrise. You can Google it.
Right.
So it's the first picture. And so what happened is when the astronauts would leave the planet, they would get this perspective. It's like, oh my gosh, like imagine you're in Sydney, Australia. I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia right now. And we forget that we're both there. From my perspective, I'm in Vancouver. This is the street corner. But in fact, from when you look at us from this perspective, there's no separation. There's a different view, right? And so the astronauts would come back with this weird spiritual experience, which is a shift in conscious awareness. That shift, that cognitive shift of conscious awareness, there's a word for it. It's called the overview effect.
Right.
Where when you zoom out and take a 30,000, 100,000, 1 million foot view of yourself, you don't see the same thing. You see something totally different. And that is called the overview effect. And so what I discovered with working with patients all of the last 18 years was that people actually, in order for them to truly heal, you must first begin by looking at yourself from a 30,000 foot view and asking yourself some very powerful questions, which shift your perspective and your context of who you are, and understanding of how you got here, and how your understanding of how everybody involved in your narrative got there, so that you now can approach your challenges with wisdom. And so the overview method is a process that I developed, a methodology where it's a simple to follow kind of self-inquiry tool that unites the mind and the body to a felt sense of unconditional love and gratitude for your journey from this perspective, and an awakening of a vision for yourself that's beyond just yourself and the here and now.
Gotcha. So it's like a helicopter view, really. It's like you're taking that big view
even further.
Get out further. Yeah.
Even further than your helicopter view. We're talking astronomical view of yourself, and staying embodied in that, and choosing that you're going to have that adventure. If I can calculate in reality, I have probably 40 to 45 years left on this planet, right? And so the neat thing is, the longer that I can stay in this overview perspective, rather than being sunk in by the hormones of stress into the ho-hum-do-drum minutia of the day, which is where my mind will go when I get triggered.
Yep.
I lose sight of that vision. The more that I can stay in that, the more of a say that I have in the creation of my world, in my reality, in my relationships, my business, the types of clients that I serve, that kind of thing.
Okay, yeah, it sounds interesting because, I mean, I think, we have a similar scenario when I was looking at your website and stuff, and then that a lot of people who develop websites don't necessarily actually even look like them, right? So their whole website's not even them, someone else's idea of them. And in a lot of cases where they haven't really got a picture of who they really are or what they're trying to achieve. And it's interesting kind of effect because every time we've gone through this process with someone developing a new platform for them or something like that, we always see this kind of shift. They suddenly realise that they can't quite explain what they do properly, and it's almost like it creates this kind of unsettling method of going, well, hang on a minute, I don't even know what I'm doing.
Totally.
And then, of course, that can go the other way too, because then they get depressed about the fact that they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
But I think it's an opportunity to actually discover something you haven't even looked at before. If
you're an entrepreneur, you can't start with a website. You must start with a 30,000 beyond foot view of the best place to start to evolve as an entrepreneur, Evolvepreneur as it's called here, is you want to evolve, you got to get out of your body and ask the question, what do I want to feel when I take my last breath on this planet? And start to work backwards. Okay, so what impact do I want to make? What are my values? What are my strengths? So you must unpack and uncover all these questions. And soon as you make a declaration of what you want to accomplish and what impact you want to make with your business, because most of the time it's like, oh, it'll be about making money. Well, yeah, that's not going to actually do it. It's got to be about what's the impact that you want to make. As soon as you make that declaration, all of the old stories and narratives about why you're not worthy based on your traumas are going to show up. And it'll be an obstacle in your hero's journey. It's kind of like the refusal of the call. When Morpheus tells Neo, you're the one, and Neo keeps saying, no, I'm not, in the Matrix movie, this is really what it's about. It's about you owning the fact that you are the one, but you must embody that. You must step into that. So your journey as an entrepreneur and your trajectory as an entrepreneur will be to the degree that you can embody your mission statement. Yep. And when I say embody, there's a difference between you if I'm working with you and I hear you say, yeah, I help entrepreneurs so and so and get better messaging and all this stuff, versus you look me in the eye and I feel it from you saying, I help entrepreneurs reconnect to their soul of why they're here. That is totally different than I build a bunch of websites and So in order for your business to really thrive, you must connect with the soul of it first. You got to get over the story that this is a bunch of wooey bullshit, because the only entrepreneurs that have deeply made an impact, like when you watch Elon Musk on an interview, say what you want about him. It's a bit of an Asperger's and a bit on the spectrum, sure. Okay. But when you hear him talk about what we're doing to the earth and renewable resources and energy, and he bursts like he's got to fight back the tears, then you're like, oh, the reason why he's so successful is because he's connected to the soul of why he's doing it. And that must be, before you get into a website, before you get into doing any website, that must be where you begin. Otherwise, you'll do your website and it will feel inauthentic. You're doing it for the sake of doing it, and it's going to come through in your messaging. It's going to come through in your voice. It's going to come through in your interview. People are not stupid. They can spot bullshit. Yep. They can spot a bullshit. Yeah. Like in your voice, if you're reserved and you don't have this right, when you speak, there won't be any power behind your voice. There won't be certainty in your client calls. On your discovery calls, you'll be hoping for approval rather than coming from a place of overflow gratitude, saying, are you ready for this vision? because this is my vision. I want to make sure you're a fit for this vision versus, will you please hire me? There's a different perspective. And the difference is the degree that you embody your mission. And it took me a while to get to the latter.
Yeah, and I think it is. I think in some respects, sometimes people go through these various different businesses too. So they kind of, no pun intended again, is they kind of evolve into it. And I think that's our journey as well. Like we went to one area, thought this was a good idea, went into marketing, went into book publishing, and then we moved into developing a platform because we realized we couldn't make a difference in a larger scale by just doing a book. Like there's just too many working parts.
Yeah, the book is just the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. So how do we, and that's a lot of authors say, God, oh, that's the end of it. I'm too tired now. I've written this book, right? But that's really your start point when you.
That's the starting point. Yeah.
And they're usually too tired. Sometimes they're too tired to keep going, and they forget about the book. And I think that's the trick is to say, okay, well, what's the big picture here? What am I trying to achieve from this book?
Exactly. You're too tired, and if the end stage is to write a book, then what? No, the book must transform lives. Then your mission. See, the goal is to finish a book, but a goal is something you work to.
Yep.
But a mission is something you work through. It's never finished. The book is just a stepping stone. Exactly. What's next is getting the book in as many people's hands. The next is to create a retreat or a program for the people who've written it, who want some sort of support, somebody to hold them their hand. So create an offer at different levels and tiers where people can participate in the outcome that you promise in that book. That's being on mission versus just setting goals.
Yeah, and I think
you can see it in the person.
And that's the interesting part. Like, if you see, do you get people like, I suppose you talked about something about not being worthy, and I think that's probably what happens. A lot of people, their actual vision or what they want to do is smaller than it could be. And I think that
I've been guilty of that.
Yeah, and you kind of think, I can't make that much of a difference, or I can't, I can't do that. And you look at other people who like we did a book once for a client that actually went through 12 months of chemo. She was only 17. She got diagnosed with this disease or cancer that was going to probably kill her, and she had like a 5% chance. So she wrote this book while she was doing chemo. And I say to clients, look, if she can write a book while she's going through 12 months of chemo, you can imagine how hard that would have been. Then anybody can do anything, right? Because to get up in the morning and keep writing or keep doing stuff like that in a potential situation where, and I mean, she eventually actually came through it and survived and is now, all clear. But the thing is that I think the book probably helped her get a bigger picture of what she was trying to achieve, because at the end of the day, she was trying to leave a legacy. And I think that made a difference in her whole therapy in the end of the day, in her mindset.
Of course. Yeah, that's it. That's the fun. That's the part of the transformation. Okay. And listening to you describe that transformation, that's your job. That's your mission. And and here's the key part. As you, John, the more that you connect with that feeling of what you were able to help with her, and you connect with that feeling every single day, what's going to happen is you're now connected to a vision that's higher than just you.
Yep.
And now that drives you, and when things aren't going well, you have that to go back to, and you're now consciously connected to your why. You can sit here and talk about marketing and all this stuff. Your greatest marketing strategy is connecting to your why every single time you put out something.
True. Yeah. And being genuine about it and authentic, because I think the problem is the world is full of deceit and lies, if you like. So the reality is being authentic and being real is what people vote that way, right?
Well, and the thing is that for good reason, it's full of deceit and lies. I mean, when you're born, you have to choose, we're conditioned to choose attachment and approval over authenticity. Because if I express my needs or my feelings or my true self, I had the experience of having love withdrawn from me. So I've been conditioned from a young age to put aside my true feelings and my authenticity for the sake of approval. as a child, right? And family dynamics. And then it happens in school. And then it happens with relationships. And it happens throughout our lives. And then we hit our 20s and 30s and 40s and go, I don't know who the hell I am. And we try to start businesses without knowing who that is. And so that's where burnout happens. That's where, constantly jumping from one project to another, looking for that, so that we can distract ourselves from the real work, which is to first and foremost reconnect and heal our wounds, so that through that healing, your purpose and your vision and your big why emerges. Those are the most powerful entrepreneurs when they take the time to do that. The biggest obstacle to doing that is, I'm too busy. Yep. I'm too busy. I have so much on the go. I can't just take a weekend away and just go inside and heal that. And so many entrepreneurs are now, they're finding that's causing burnout, health problems, relationship challenges, one divorce after another. I mean, Elon Musk, successful entrepreneur, 3 marriages, 3 divorces.
That's a lot of money to pay back out of your wealth, right?
Exactly, right, exactly. So that's why, the overview experience is a weekend where entrepreneurs can come and just say, all right, I'm going to hit the pause button of my reality that's just repetitive, going around in circles, and I'm going to go and I'm going to use that opportunity to get to a 30,000 and beyond foot view of myself, go back and see all of those old unworthiness stories that have stopped me, find the origin of them, go back and heal and reparent that younger self that was abandoned as a child, or that I abandoned because I chose approval over authenticity. Heal that and come out on the other side with a far more powerful, emergent leader born within you. And so that's what I love doing for entrepreneurs now.
Wow. And I think I read somewhere a long time ago was that most of what you think every day is what you think every day. Like 80 to 90% of what you think is the same thing day in, day out. And so those are basically strong threads going through your mindset, and then at the end of the day, the stuff you're thinking it probably isn't that great either. And
most of the time you're unconscious. So the way that we work with people is just to kind of get them conscious to what I call the dark passenger, the old narratives, and we start to create new ones, not just in the mind but also in the body.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing. I think it's funny that we've suddenly, in the last few years, it seems, that people have realised that there's a connection between the mind and the body. It's much like a revelation. You think, well, hang on a minute, that's pretty obvious, isn't it, now?
Yeah.
You look back and think, why didn't they think of that before? Like, it's almost like they treat the disease. And the same thing, like, I had bowel cancer a couple of years ago, and one of the things that happened from that was that I noticed that the way the system works is that you really production line through this system. So you go from one person to another, they perform their tasks, and at the end they push you out the door and say, see you again, maybe again, later, see you next time.
And it completely lacks your story, your ecosystem, beliefs, the traumas you went through. Your bowel cancer came from an old trauma that was unresolved.
Yeah, and I pretty much know what it was. Now looking back, I think, because we went through like a 7-year war with a supplier. And so, I look back and think, well, I probably, a lot of that stuff was brought on by that.
The anger, the bitterness, and the resentment. Exactly.
The stress.
The stress of it. Yeah. Well, you get 7 years of a legal battle is enough to destroy your health. So I'm of the mind of teaching entrepreneurs tools of resilience so that they can take on those challenges not at the expense of their own health and well-being. You must learn how to become trigger-proof. So, John, if you had learned how to be trigger-proof throughout that process, you'd be able to alchemize that pain and that resentment and that resistance into absolute power. And that's your work. That's your inner work, the journey from your head to your heart that will really catapult you to the next level.
And I think the turning point there was that when you realised through this whole process that we weren't going to win. So all through that war that we went through, we knew that it was just a matter of time. So we didn't have a situation where we ever knew we were going to win. We were almost like fighting a war because we had nowhere else to go. And you're basically in a situation where you know you're going to lose. So you're not really thinking well in that process anyway. And
We're just fighting for the sake of fighting.
fighting for survival. And I think that basic level is where you probably do the most damage to yourself, because you're not looking after what you're doing and stuff like that. And I mean, at the time I exercised, I do as much as I could, but the reality was that underlying fear of knowing that it was a ticking time bomb, that someday it was just going to blow up in your face. And so it's interesting, once we got through that process, and I haven't had a reoccurrence or anything like that, because I know now that mental resilience and keeping on top of it and not letting it get to you is a big thing. And I mean, a lot of people don't necessarily get that lucky, right? I mean, another guy came into surgery and to the doctor the same week and wouldn't take the tests, and had 6 months later metastatised. And exact same problem. But the reality is they did nothing about it, and they weren't caught early enough. So the reality is that I think the danger is that you're not listening to your body. And I wasn't listening to my body in the end. Like, I was just thought, we're just getting older and tighter.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
And so
we are living in an epidemic of people that are dissociated from their bodies, their feelings. We do everything to sedate, and we do everything to numb. We seek it in a drink. We seek it in an affair, all to avoid the work of sitting with feelings and learning how to alchemize the feelings, because we don't know how to be with feelings. And so you can see that when a person is in their head all the time versus in their heart. And so this journey from my head to my heart has been a healing journey that, when I look around, almost 100% of people walking around are unconsciously separated from head to heart. And I look at them and I can actually see through, and my job is to get them reconnected to their hearts. Over a weekend, we can do it.
So what do you think that's caused that to get that way? Is it because, too much, like, I read someone just recently that talked about the fact that when TV was invented, that their theory was that people would entertain themselves to death.
Yeah. Well, it's a distraction. See, let's say you're a 5-year-old and then you experience your parents' divorce, or you experience some sort of, you watched domestic violence, or you had it, happen to you, or there was some sexual trauma. The nervous system becomes so overwhelmed with stimulus and pain that it almost feels unbearable. So the solution is to detach and dissociate. That's one way. Boom. You detach and dissociate from feelings because it doesn't feel safe to be in your body. And so now you come up with strategies to dissociate from your body, whether it be Netflix, TV, all of the drugs, alcohol. When feelings come up, we don't know how to sit with them and be with them and to allow them the space to breathe, so we detach and dissociate. Another way that it'll happen is, especially in your culture, what's your background? Is it European, English, British?
Well, English originally, I think. My background's kind of a bit fuzzy, so I don't really know, because I was adopted, but it was an English background.
Okay, perfect. So here it is. I've worked with adopted people, and I'm not saying you, because I've never worked with you. The main challenge with adoption that we see is how old were you when you were adopted?
I think I was adopted from the hospital, so I was a ward of the state for about 5 years, but I was actually adopted from the hospital. So
from the hospital. Now, we might think that children don't experience pain and all that stuff, but if you're in utero and your mother went through stress, the baby downloads the stress hormones and experiences the stress of the mother.
Wow.
Okay? So that will hypersensitize your nervous system. That's a form of trauma. The birth itself is a trauma. A child being separated from his mother and then being adopted, you don't have a conscious memory of that. Because it's pre-verbal. It's before you had language. Okay. But I guarantee you, your body will have a memory of that.
Wow.
Okay? And so these are the moments where we are conditioned to dissociate from feelings. And let's say you were raised with parents that were abusive, or you had feelings come up and they told you, don't cry, John. Don't cry. Just it's in my culture they say don't cry. Like it's ugly. Don't cry. What will other people think? And so in that moment, I'm conditioned that these feelings that come up that I don't have control over are not appropriate and they're not validated. So we all start. And we have it in our culture. You better not shout. You better not pout. You better not cry. I'm telling you why. Like all of those feelings and emotions are taught to be stuffed, suppressed, or repressed. So all of a sudden we now have a society, especially if you're Chinese, especially if you're Persian, especially if you're English, any cultural where society is important, where keeping up with stoic, keeping up with appearances, especially if you have organized religion where there's good and there's evil. So whatever that normal, whatever is evil. So no, we suppress that. So you are now conditioned to suppress feelings and not trust them and not have them validated. So you don't know who you are. So you don't trust them. And so that's the beginning of the self-abandonment and self-betrayal. And we do it again and again in relationships. We do it in our work. And all of the impact of this not being resolved and integrated is a healthy body that's destroyed, a healthy mind that's fragmented, relationships that potentially can be healthy become dissociated because now we start to repeat those patterns of betrayal in childhood because they're so familiar to our nervous system. We seek them out in other people in our relationships. And we go into these patterns of dating the same person, marrying the same person, finding the same jobs. Oh, maybe I'll move to another country and going through the exact same thing. And is all of these unresolved traumas. So the long story short, to answer your question, where does it all come from, is trauma. Unresolved trauma in the mind and unresolved trauma in the body. So I've created a method to resolve that.
That's interesting, because at the end of the day, it's definitely about taking that step back and looking at yourself when what other people see and you don't necessarily see. Right.
That is one of the steps, but you're bypassing the most important one, is to drop into the body and feel first. Feel what you're feeling. Feel the betrayal. Feel the fear. We don't want to do that. We want to avoid it. We want to do everything we can to not talk about it, not feel it, bypass it. And so the healing comes from first feeling it.
Because it's interesting when I was adopted, I never knew I never met my mother or anything like that, but we were aware, my sister and knew who they were and all that sort of stuff, sort of kept a bit of track. But we accidentally found her a couple of years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago. She actually found out she was living in the same town as me, but not at the same time. And anyway, we found her by accident, and she actually called me up, and the first question she asked me was, did I blame her? That was the first. So she was nearly 80 then. She was about to have her 80th birthday, and she probably had me around her 30s. So for 50 years, that question's been in her head, right? Did I blame her? And so it's quite interesting how someone
what did you say? How did you respond to her?
I said I didn't, because I felt like it was the way it worked out for me was fine. I mean, yes, I had a lot of challenges when I was younger too.
Who didn't?
When I look back at what happened to her other kids and the way that her other kids grew up, mostly were under a lot of pressure.
It was a blessing.
It was a blessing. I actually did me a favour, right? Because at the end of the day, I could look at one of those.
Did you thank her?
Yeah.
Did you thank her for putting?
I don't know.
Is she still alive? She's not still alive, is she?
No, she's still alive, yeah.
Mike, okay, so if you were a client of mine, I would actually get you to call her and thank her for it.
Right.
Because that kind of puts a completion in the story, in the narrative, and there's a healing, there's an energetic closure that happens in your body when you can do that and provide that for her. You're contributing some healing towards her. And John, what that's going to do for you is that's going to open your heart as well. And that's part of your healing too. You're contributing to her. You just say, listen, I understand you've been holding on to guilt for so long. Please understand, I get that it must have been a really difficult decision for you. I can see how difficult that must have been for a mother to give up their child, and what space and state you must have been in to go through the pregnancy and to give that up must have been really difficult for you. And you must have been like a mother's guilt is just so real, right? So that
And
must
they lay
have
it
been,
on thick, don't they?
yeah, towards themselves.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah, they lay it on thick towards themselves. So you would set her free by saying, I want you to know that was probably the most loving thing that you did, and I'm grateful, and I want you to be free of that, and just know that I'm grateful. And say, if she's in Sydney, just say, it's not too late for me to, include you, and like, I'm still your son. I always will be. And to provide that is what we do, because essentially most problems that you go through in your business is a personal problem, and most of your personal problems are actually relationship problems. So if you can go back to your most primitive relationships, mom and dad, which you have fragmented, fractured, stories of, which who doesn't, right? But to go back and actually repair that builds your foundation as a human being, which is a foundation for your business. So by you taking that time and taking your biological mother like out for coffee or whatever, and saying, listen, I just want you to know ABC and what it must have been like for you, and I guarantee you she'll burst into tears and say thank you, right? And then that will heal her heart and yours. And so those are the action steps. It sounds very odd, but this is the work I do with entrepreneurs. In fact, I remember one of my entrepreneurs is a really successful construction guy, has about a $5 million business in Australia. And he was stuck, and he wanted to get up to 10, up to 30, up to 40, and he's like stuck. And so we discovered that his CEO, he fired a CEO of his company about 3-4 years ago, right? He fired a CEO of his company about 3 or 4 years ago, and there was a court case that happened, and he hasn't spoken to him ever since. And just thinking about him makes him anxious. Right. So we did some work clearing some of the charges and the trauma of that whole difficult event. As you know, litigation can be quite difficult. He went through that. So he's been holding on to the trauma of the litigation for years, right? And it's keeping him stuck in his business. So we went and cleared that whole trauma from it. And then his homework was to contact that old CEO and get complete with him. And he was like freaking out. He was like, shit, no, I don't want to do that. He was scared. He's like, forget it. And I was like, you better do it. You've paid me a lot of money to coach you. Might I remind you what you paid me? You must demand results, and these results won't happen unless you get complete. So we completed that. He called the guy, and they had a conversation, and he really just shared with him his inauthenticities, and just to say, look, I know it didn't turn out well, but I'm grateful for this is what I learned. What was the experience like for you? And kind of like what I asked you to do with your mother, he went and got that completion with him, and guess what happened within 2 weeks of that conversation? Pardon me? No, he didn't rehire him, but he signed a $5 million deal somewhere else. In other words, that little constraint, that little
released,
that open loop in his past that was causing him anxiety whenever he thought about it, he let go of that. It was released. It was like baggage that was dropped. All of a sudden, he saw possibility and opportunity and landed a massive, like a $5 million deal within 2 weeks. I was like, damn, I didn't charge you enough.
Should have taken a percentage.
Yeah. I was like, damn, I should have charged you way, but you got a deal for this.
Yeah, and you're right, and I think we see this in a little bit with entrepreneurs who start lots of businesses. And I've been guilty of this too. Like over the years, is that we start something, try something, and they end up with this whole lump of confusion that you never actually figured out who you really were, and focusing on what you're trying to achieve rather than keeping busy doing all these different things. They're not coming into anything, and they're seeing through it anyway. So it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Totally. It's good to have, and that's one of the things that, I want to leave this conversation with is just to really get that, get yourself a mentor. You cannot do this alone. Entrepreneurship is like being the lone wolf. Like, I am grateful for my team, coaches. Like, I got, like my coach, like so I'm a coach to this really high level entrepreneur in in San Diego, and I went to his event. He did a live event, and his live event teaches coaches like me and you how to create events. Which I have events, but when I went to his event, I was like, damn, this is like 10 levels up from my event. So I hired his company to help teach me how to, I hired my own coach to teach me how to run events. So we get, like, the high performers have not just one, but several coaches. You got to decide, and this is like the number one investment is in yourself. Like, you got to bet on you if you want to evolve as an entrepreneur.
Well, it's interesting. Actually, I did an interview with a guy called Fred a couple of weeks ago, and he's worth a couple of $100 million now. And he said he had an emotional coach or something. And I thought, well, that was interesting because he's identified that he needs that support for whatever reason.
Well, here's the thing. That's exactly what I do as well. Because here's the thing, 18 years as a chiropractor and now a business person. I've gone through a divorce. I've gone through a collapse of my business before. And my greatest constraint is your greatest constraint, is your inability to regulate your emotions. That's what I said earlier, is becoming trigger-proof. Learning how to become trigger-proof is the greatest skill you can learn as an entrepreneur, as a parent, as a lover, as a human being. Because within that, you can create safety in your universe so that others feel safe around you and that you create safety rather than expecting others to create it for you. You're the one that creates the safety because you create an internal safety mechanism. That's the whole point of becoming trigger-proof.
That's nice. Yeah, that's a great idea. It makes a lot of sense. Cool. So we were just talking before, you actually were in Sydney and you're coming back again.
Yeah.
So how do people get in touch with you? And sort of
we're a date for the overview experience coming up probably the first couple of weeks of September this year. But it's on my website. Way to get in contact with me. There are some amazing resources there. Whether it be, the main thing for entrepreneurs is the whole concept of transitional anxiety. The going where you are to where you would love to be. That transition, you must take on a new identity in order to do it. So I've mastered that whole journey, of you being Neo, emerging to become the one. I take on the role of the Middle Eastern Morpheus that helps you kind of emerge in that. And that's the process of going through the transitional anxiety of becoming the one in your business. And so we teach you how to do that in the weekend workshop. So it's all on the website, drnima.com, and easy access to any questions or whatever, or joining my Facebook group, The Art of Powerful Alignment, and my Instagram is there too, at Dr. Nima. So there's several gifts there to to watch and to digest as resources. My Trigger Proof show is all on the website. So it's all there on the website.
I was actually looking at a couple of the shows there. It's quite very well done. So I think, it's a great resource, even if you just go there and have a look at a couple of the shows. It's very, very well done.
Absolutely. Pick the topic that interests you. It's all about mastering your relationship with yourself, really, so that you can evolve and show up as the leader in your business and relationships.
Very well.
Ultimately impacts your health.
Yes, it all flows up. It all comes together, right? It all comes calling if you don't do it right.
You bet.
So really appreciate your time. That's really a great session. And I hope to actually meet you soon, maybe, and maybe come and see you.
That would be an amazing experience for you. I promise you, you won't leave the same individual. The Friday that you attend, you leave on Sunday completely transformed, with connected to your power, your why, and excited about possibilities.
Nice. Great. All right. Well, thank you again for your time, and I'll talk to you again soon.
See you at the next perfect time.